This video right here is more of an introduction to who I am. I want to talk about my journey to this point. As I looked back at the previous videos I've done, I realized I haven't really explained who I am as a person as much as I've explained who I am as a documentary filmmaker and what my career has consisted of. I'm just going to talk about my life, what inspired me to get into this industry to begin with, and we're just going to start from the beginning. So I still remember as a kid, I would be going to all these weddings with my parents. I come from a big Catholic family in the Midwest. My dad was one of 8 kids. I have like 27 cousins. And so naturally, as I was growing up, it seemed like there was a wedding every single month. And this is in the early to mid 90s. And when you're a kid constantly going to weddings and you're in and out of church, it's very boring. It's not a setting that is a lot of fun. But what I found really exciting was my dad was an early adopter of one of those dad cam VHS recorders that goes on your shoulder. It was about the size of the rig that I use right now. And at that time, not many people had their own VHS cameras. My dad was an early adopter of the technology. And so naturally, people were always asking him to film their wedding. And so instead of having to sit in the pews at a wedding service, I was able to stand in the back with my dad as he had his VHS camera on a tripod. And it was like he was a celebrity. He didn't get paid anything to do this. He was just doing favors for family and friends. But it was so cool because at that time, it was like the most groundbreaking thing ever. And there's a certain sort of power that I saw. When you're the guy with the camera, everyone wants to come in front of it. This is a different era, mind you. Today, it's not quite the same because people are so used to cell phones and the ease of being able to do video. But back in the 90s, you didn't have a cell phone. And so when you were the guy with the VHS, people flocked towards you. They wanted to be recorded. They wanted to be on video. All of a sudden, my dad went from being my dad to one of the most popular people at these events because he had a camera. So that was one of my first exposures to filmmaking. Granted, I know it's not glamorous or anything cool, but it really caught my attention as a kid, and it only blossomed from there. Whenever I was in grade school, we had these projects where the teacher would say, hey, you can do a poster board, you can write an essay, you can make a video. For me, having the option to make a video was always my go-to. I would do that route every single time, and so that was really my first exposure to using the video camera. Is my dad would let me borrow it so I could do a class project. And typically these were group projects. So I'd have 2 or 3 of my classmates, usually my friends in my group. And we would make the most outrageous videos ever, playing characters, putting on different costumes and things just to be able to do this for a class project. And at that time, you were almost always guaranteed to get an A because it was extra creative. You were being innovative with a modern technology. And that was really where things started to take off for me. When I was about in 6th grade, I remember the transition from analog to digital. And again, thanks to my dad, he was an early adopter of a digital camera. That was a complete game-changing moment for me. I think when he bought his Dell computer, it came with an early digital camera. The resolution was fucking terrible. It looked awful, but it was cool. And it was free to take photos. Growing up, if I wanted to take a photo, we had to go develop film, which cost money. So my parents would be very sparing on how often we could use the camera. But when it came to digital, all of a sudden they had a memory card in them, and that memory card could be used over and over and over and over again. And so I remember that first digital camera and being able to take photos. That one didn't do video yet, but it could do photos. And so I started learning things like what's composition. It wasn't like I was taking very artsy photos, but I was able to start understanding what makes a photo kind of look cool. I'm 7th grade. But that opened my eyes. And then I'd say about a year later on Black Friday, my dad pulled the trigger on a Canon digital camera. And that one had a video feature. That was the most game-changing moment of my entire life and really what led me down this path. As a teenager and in the earliest days of the internet, having the ability to make a video when cell phones still couldn't produce videos was like magic. My friends and I would take that everywhere. We would do spoofs where we'd just randomly show up to people's houses like we were doing MTV Cribs. We would do stupid music videos. We would make little stories and act them out. I did that all through high school. And it got to the point once I was in high school, we had a radio TV course. At that time, all the other teachers saw it as a joke of a class. It was always like the class that they looked down on. This isn't a real class. Why do we have this here? And when I look around my classmates now and I see where we're at, we had a very well-known news anchor in that classroom. We had multiple people working within the industry in that classroom. We had somebody who acted in the show Empire and was in one of the Batman movies. We had somebody like myself who owns a video production company and makes documentary films. That actually became an incubator for creativity within my high school. And to this day, that class still exists. And it's not taken as a joke like it used to be. They've invested in more resources. Granted, I haven't been in there in a few years, but I do have younger siblings, so I was able to kind of stay in touch with what they were doing. But that was a very big defining moment for me. My parents went to one of the parent-teacher conferences, which I remember thinking at the time was really weird. I was always somebody who got good grades. I was an A and B student, but for some reason, my parents went to my parent-teacher conferences, and I'm glad they did, because when they spoke to my radio TV teacher, he was somebody who had been teaching radio and broadcast television courses for about 15 years at that time. And what he told my parents was that I was one of the most gifted students that he had ever had. And me and him had a good relationship, but I had no idea he was going to say something like that to my parents. When my parents came home that night, they had told me what he had said to them. I think they knew that this was an area that I was interested in, but they really encouraged me to actually pursue this path. And that was kind of the green light for me. Up until that moment, I thought I was going to go to school to be an architect, or I might enter healthcare to be a doctor or a dentist. A lot of my friends now are doctors and dentists, and I'm a filmmaker. Because of that conversation, sometimes I feel a certain way about it. Maybe my life would be a little bit less stressful had I went the other path, but I wouldn't have this creative outlet. This became something for me that I became obsessed with. And so I went to college. I went to Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana. It is in this area, it is known as kind of a party school, but it had an amazing telecommunications program. I went to school in the building that David Letterman helped fund. He was the distinguished alumni from my university. And I still remember my first year there. There was a plaque outside of our editing bays, and it had David Letterman's, a quote from David Letterman on it. And it said, this is dedicated to all C students before and after me. And I always thought that was funny because it shows his sense of humor, but it also shows the reality. When you're going down a creative path, yes, you can get a degree, but ultimately your success isn't going to be determined by the degree you get and how you rank among your classmates. It's going to be determined by how hungry you are to be successful. And I was somebody who took that mindset very serious in my 20s. I started to believe that this was something that I could do, and I had just probably too much confidence, honestly, because going into what would have been my senior year, I had completed all of my degree requirements. I had 3 semesters of Spanish and 6 credit hours in addition that I needed to fulfill my degree. But at that point in time, I had already started freelancing, and I was having classmates come back on the weekends who had already graduated a year or two before me, and they would be talking about their careers, and a lot of them were filming weddings, or, they were freelancing, or they worked at a news station barely getting paid anything. And I started to realize, holy shit, I'm in college right now and I'm already freelancing. I already have a career that's equivalent to a lot of my peers who have their degrees. And so I actually decided not to go that final year to school, started a business, and that led me down this path that I've been on. For the first 3 years after that, I experimented with a clothing line. Streetwear was really cool back then. A lot of people were into that. I was into the music scene. I had done music videos with people like Mike Jones, the rapper, Juicy J. I had done some things with some well-established people in the rap scene that I grew up seeing on MTV. So I thought I was hot shit at the time. I thought that was going to be what I did. And so I made a streetwear brand, and I got those guys to rep my clothes on stage. Thought that was amazing. Thought that was my path in life. I look back now at it, and I think it's kind of funny because I don't even listen to rap. at this point. But, at that moment, it was a big deal. I had people in my small town being like, "Oh my God, you're famous, man. Like, you made it." And they couldn't be more wrong. But what that did do for me is, in having a clothing brand and making connections with celebrity type figures, was that I was building networking skills, and I was also learning how to market, not just market clothing, but market myself. And in doing that, I found out that I really enjoyed creating videos to promote my products. And around that time, I was actually still shooting music videos here and there. I had a friend who would pay me like $500 to shoot a video for him. And on this one particular day, I was filming a music video at my parents' house. My parents have a cool yard. They had a nice deck. I have a big pond. And it was like a party music video. And so we had all these people on the deck. And it was actually my birthday. And we were all 21 at that point. So we're playing like beer pong. And people are taking shots, having a good time. And I remember as I was filming, my buddy, who was the musician in this instance, he decided he was going to get a hold of every girl in his phone because he wanted to look like he was like this ladies' man with all these chicks around him. And so he just started contacting different classmates. And about 30 minutes later, I remember seeing this girl walk down the hill of my parents' house towards the pond while we were filming. And she caught my attention, and I was just kind of, checking her out. I was 21. And I remember going up to my friends at that time, and I told them, I'm like, I don't know who that is, but I'm going to go talk to her. I'm going to get her number. Long story short, she became my wife. It just so happened that she was a graphic designer in school at that time. She also was a photographer. And so we had this mutual interest. And through that relationship, I actually taught her how to shoot video, how to edit video. And ever since then, she has been like my right-hand man. We're partners in life. We're partners in business. She knows how to shoot. She knows how to edit. She was a huge part of the series that we have on YouTube. She was my assistant editor for that. And she got all of the ambient shots. When we cut away to a crowd, or you see the lights, or you see things that aren't the football game, that's stuff that she's recording, and every single day of my life, she's working right next to me. We're creating together. Now we have 2 kids, and our kids are creating, they're drawing, they're very creative. And so we created this really creative, I guess, home. And because I have a partner who's artistic and creative like me, she understands how I feel about this path. She understands the calling that I have, and she feels it herself. And so that's one of the better joys of my life, is I have somebody that I can share it with who believes in me. I believe in them, and it allows us to really work well together. I have known multiple people in this industry who don't have that luxury. They have a spouse who doesn't like that they're in this field, that wants them to get a real career despite them, doing pretty well for themselves. So I was very lucky in that regard. And then the other thing that's unique about my path is, shortly after I had met my wife, we actually incorporated a real business called Loft House Films with my brother. And that's my older brother, and he has done business development for the commercial side of my career since then. And to this day, he still does that. So he manages communications with a lot of our clients. He does the contracts. He books the projects. And really, that takes a big burden off my shoulders, because what that allows me to do is just to focus on my craft. Granted, I still have to go to meetings. I have to pitch people. I operate as a creative director / filmmaker / whatever you want to call it. I'm really kind of a Swiss Army knife at this point, but he works with me. And then because I was doing all this wild creative video stuff growing up, my younger brother, who is actually 8 years younger than me, caught an interest in this as well, and he is one of my closest collaborators too. So he works with me on commercial projects, and he is like my secondary shooter on projects like the New North, the wiffle ball thing that we filmed this summer. And so that's been really cool as well. I grew up in a family that I didn't see as creative. My family is very brainy. It's not a family that had any creative examples that I could even think of. I think the only person I know in my family that was creative is like 1,000 years ago. One of my distant relatives was like a famous musician in Germany and has like statues of him still like in some town squares. But other than that, I had no examples in my family of people who were creative and made a career out of this. And so I still remember being in my 20s and going down this path and one of the things I would constantly hear is, oh, you need to get a real job. You need to find something that you can be serious about because this is more of a hobby. And I would hear that from family members, aunts, uncles. I would hear that from friends and their parents. A lot of people, when you do something unconventional and you do something entrepreneurial, a lot of people they will inflict on you how they feel about themselves. And so what I learned after time is that when people tell me that I was going to fail and I wasn't being realistic, it was them talking about their own lives rather than mine. And so I've been somebody my whole life who has been big into taking risk. I've been somebody who's also very competitive. And so when I have people telling me that I'm going to fail, I use that as fuel. I have a chip on my shoulder and I'm going to do everything I can to prove them wrong. And I carry that with me to this day. When we were shooting The New North, we were having these Barstool accounts on X that were talking shit. And I use that as motivation. I always do. Even some of my peers that I work with in my day job, that we collaborate with, when I was doing this, a lot of people were thinking it was crazy because most people they're not wired in the way that I am, to where I like to take risk. I like to take that chance. I like to swing big. The way that I've always viewed it is, as a human being on this planet, we have a limited amount of time. And when I look throughout history, there's all sorts of people who've done just amazing creative things. And the way I see it is, if they could do it, why can't I? They're no different than me. They have 2 hands, 2 feet. They have a brain between the ears. If they can figure it out, if they can make a career out of something, then so can I. And so that's where I'm at. That's what fuels me, because it's something, again, I would be doing this even if I was rich and I didn't have to work. Like, this truly is what I love doing. And I do believe that if you can combine your passion with your skill set, good things are going to happen. And that's what I've been banking on my whole life. I am 33 and a half years old right now. I have never clocked into a job for an employer. I have been able to be self-sufficient my entire adult life. I'm able to buy a home, have vehicles, raise a family without having to, go clock in for the man and have a corporate job. For me, that is the biggest sign of success that I've had, because I get to live life on my terms. And part of this channel too is, if I do a good job teaching you guys, you guys can have that same luxury. This is a very cutthroat industry at times, but it also provides a lot of freedom. And so time management skills obviously are a big part of it. But really, I always like to joke that, there'll be a month or two where I'm busier than hell. I'm knocking out 8 to 10 projects, and I might make half of my year's income in 2 months. And then I have 3 months where I'm really not doing shit. And that's whenever the projects like The New North became something that I could pursue, is because I had this cyclical business and I just needed stuff to fill my time with. And so what better way than to do stuff directly in my interest? And so without this as my career, The New North would never exist. And so I always encourage people, if you're feeling that nudge to go a creative route, just do it. Just do it. I know people who have lost everything and rebuild it again, later in life. Life is life. You only get to do this once. And that's how I've always lived it. I just have faith in myself. I have faith in the people I work with, that we're going to figure it out. We're going to make it work. And so that's what my life has looked like up until this point. And what I'm trying to do from here is, I'm trying to get more out of the commercial world and into this direct-to-audience entertainment world. I see the creator economy as something that's incredibly enticing. The reality that right now in this world, we have Hollywood on one hand is broken and doesn't understand how to navigate this new era. And then on the other side of it, you have this creator economy where you have single moms and teenage kids and old men making videos with cell phones, and they're making 6 figures a year on YouTube. There's this weird thing happening right now. And the way I see it is, this whole industry is going through a transitionary phase. I believe that YouTube channels are going to be the future TV shows. Seeing that YouTube now has 13% of market share against Netflix is wild. If you would have told people that just a few years ago, they would have said you're crazy. Now you got SUBSTACK and Instagram and other platforms building TV apps, trying to capitalize on this momentum and in this moment in time. And so really, there's probably never been a better time to be creative and put yourself out there on the internet. And so that's what I'm doing. This is still uncomfortable for me to talk in front of a camera like this, But again, I see this as a huge opportunity. What I'm trying to do with my other channel, the program, is I'm trying to build one of the most watched TV shows in the world. And I'm not talking about a TV show like a broadcast TV show, but an unscripted TV show. I'm going to be finding people on the West Coast, the East Coast, down south, up north. I'm going to be telling the stories that people don't think about, because that's where I have my interest. I believe that the best view of the human experience isn't in the most extreme example, it's in the most common example. And that's what I look for. And I have built a career on finding stories with just regular people. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what I'm building right now. And so if you don't yet, I would encourage you, please go over to the program. I will link it to this video. Go subscribe to that. I have about 12,000 subscribers, and I will answer any questions that you guys have about that right here on this channel. And so again, feel free, drop any comments below if you have any questions. I'm here to help. Until next time, take it easy.